Point 5, dialogue among the religions. Starting with the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, the major religions of the world tentatively began to enter into conscious dialogue with each other. As with all paradigm shifts, there was great resistance, but it slowly gave way to increasing dialogue. And then a great leap forward was taken by the Catholic Church's authoritative commitment to interreligious dialogue at Vatican Council II, pulling much of the Protestant world increasingly the non-Christian world as well in its wake. I must say that I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the history that led up to that council, and the Catholic Church resisted tooth and nail being drawn into the dialogue, but with the help of the Holy Spirit, as we Christians would say, and Pope St. John the 23rd, it happened. Let me give a personal testimony. My wife, Arlene, and I launched the Journal of Ecumenical Studies already during the Second Vatican Council in 1964. And already, a year later, in 1965, we took on board the first non-Christian associate editor. And then in 1978, though, Marcel, that's not 20 years ago, that's 30 years ago. She was never very good at math. But in 1978, I started the Dialogue Institute. And in 40-some years since the beginning of the Journal of Ecumenical Studies and the Second Vatican Council, there have been millions of interreligious dialogues on all levels, from grassroots encounters to scholarly and official leadership meetings. They surged even further with the collapse of the Soviet Union and its repressed satellites. I myself published 14 books on interreligious dialogue in the years 1990 to 1992 alone. For all of its destruction and violent aftermath to today, the tragedy of 9/11 has also unleashed a flood of Muslim scholars and leaders entering vigorously into interreligious dialogue. The International Scholars Abrahamic Trialogue, ISAT, which we are here today continuing, throughout the quarter of a century of its existence up to 2001, could find in the whole world perhaps a dozen Muslim scholars capable of and interested in interreligious dialogue. Now there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and more appearing every day. It seems that God writes straight with crooked lines. Let me turn to business. Perhaps the most powerful institution for the promotion of change in the world today is the corporation. The corporations of the world control vastly more money than the governments of the world. Have the changes engendered by corporations until now been mostly beneficial for the majority of women and men, or mostly deleterious? A relatively simple question, but one which would demand a very complicated and nuanced response. Rather than indulge in history, I would like to look at the present and to the future to address that question. As the power of world business expanded exponentially, there concomitantly grew a concern for a stronger commitment to ethics in business. And as with the shift in the area of interreligious dialogue at the end of the Cold War, 1990, so too a beginning flood of changes in the realm of business, ethics, and values was released in the 1990s. The U.S. Congress passed legislation that would lessen the penalties against business caught violating ethics if they had already in place a code of business ethics and, along with that, a program instructing their employees on how to follow it. This quickly gave birth to the Ethics Officers Association. Now granted, business ethics engendered in this way, was a sort of do the right thing to avoid hell kind of approach, rather than simply because it was the right thing. However, that approach is also the starting place that most religions and ethical systems are familiar with as the first phase of developing human ethics. Although J.C. Penney, as one of the first to publish a corporate code of ethics in the United States, issued theirs in 1913 already, it was not until the early 1970s that the adoption of corporate codes of ethics became widespread in the United States and North America. By the end of the 20th century, 80% of Canadian firms and 97% of US firms had corporate codes of ethics. Their implementation, of course, remained a matter of concern. The 1990s also saw the development of a series of codes of business ethics on a worldwide basis. Many of you have already seen these codes in the material that was sent you beforehand, or you can easily find them on my website. Among others, there is the Round Table Principles, the Series Principles, the Kiyosei Principles, United Nations Business Compact, and the code derived from the scriptures and traditions of the three Abrahamic religions under the patronage of Prince Philip of England, Sir Evelyn Rothschild, also England, and our own Princess Anne bin Talal here in Jordan.